flat paint, eggshell, or semi-gloss? Today on the Landlord Coach Daily Show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Landlord Coach Daily Show. My name is Mark Dolfini, your host and Landlord Coach. It's really good to see you today. So today we're going to be talking about a conversation that never seems to end. It doesn't matter, you get three people in a room, there's going to be three different opinions. Flat paint, eggshell, or semi-gloss. And if you have not repainted a room lately, I'm telling you, this is going to be a conversation. So let's go ahead and have it out. I'm going to give you a perspective, and I can promise you, if you have you can have 100 different people in a room. There's going to be 100 different perspectives on this, but I'm just going to give you my perspective, and feel free to disagree with me. You can go ahead and post your comments, and I will try to address them. The only thing is, so I'm using StreamYard. If you're not familiar with, maybe some of you are. I can't see your comments if you're on my personal page, so I'll try to connect those. But if you're on the Landlord Coach page, I can answer those. They'll come through on the StreamYard. So I'm not ignoring you, I promise. And I know sometimes my bride will say hello, and people are like, "Man, why are you ignoring your bride?" I'm like, "I'm not. I promise." Besides, that'd be stupid. If you've seen my bride, you would know that she's way out of my league. So yeah, why wouldn't I want to pay attention to her? Anyway, so the conversation today is flat paint, eggshell, or semi-gloss. What's the best for your rental? What's the best to do? What's the best to use? And so it comes into a conversation of really. I'm going to back up a little bit, and I'm going to talk about how quickly you can turn your rentals. Okay, so this is the thing. So the whole concept of this is, if you understand the concept of so much, not so much about renting properties as it is selling time, right? So you sell time. So if you have an inventory of time, you're never going to get that day's worth of inventory back if you have a vacancy today, right? So if your house sits vacant for 2 or 3 months, you're never going to get that 2 or 3 months back. Every day that you lose is a day of inventory you will never get back, right? So the context of this, I want you to look through that perspective. Of course, it's not the only perspective, but look through that lens when I'm talking about, flat paint, eggshell, semi-gloss, that sort of thing. So I'm going to try to do this in, staying with 10 to 12 minutes, because this could go on and on and on. But through that lens and through that lens only, I'm going to look through the flat paint, eggshell, or semi-gloss. Here's the thing. So I like to paint walls with flat paint, and there's a couple of different reasons as to why. Now, flat paint is going to be cheaper just because of the nature of the chemical background and everything else it is. Now, I don't like to use low-end, low-quality flat paint. I always like to use a good quality paint. You will save it in labor. I never understood why people would go to try to find the cheapest paint that they could find to paint the wall, and then they have to do like 3 coats just to cover up, whatever it is they're trying to cover. So get yourself some decent paint, and there's all sorts of paints out there. We'll have maybe another discussion in terms of which quality, but I'm just letting it there. So there's contractor grade, and then there's generally a plus level that's kind of above, the top end, and then you have a high end type quality paint. Somewhere in the middle is generally good, but if you go with high quality paint, it goes on like honey, it goes on smooth, it covers well. I generally like to pay a little bit more for good quality paint than trying to use the cheapest bucket of paint that I could find. That's just me. And again, I'm looking to save on labor, because the labor is generally the more expensive part of this. All right, so that's just me. So I like to go with a good quality flat paint on the walls. On the walls, I would always recommend with a flat paint. Why wouldn't I want to go with an eggshell? Why wouldn't I want to go with a semi-gloss? Because I hear the arguments already. Well, if I go with a semi-gloss or go with an eggshell, I can wipe the walls down. And that is true to a certain extent. There are some really good high-quality paints that are eggshell and semi-gloss that you can practically scour on it, right? You can rub it on it. But the thing is that that is only, it's got a limited amount that you can do that with, and it's going to start to look worn over time. And when it starts to look worn, let's say for example that someone hung up something on a wall and they used, whatever it was, they hung a TV mount on the wall, and you're going to fix those holes. Those holes are going to be really hard to fix those holes and it not look fixed. That's the downside of having anything that's got a gloss on it. Think of it this way. Have you ever seen like a nice, bright, shiny black car that's got a nice high gloss to it, right? If it's got any imperfections, like any parking lot dings or anything like that, it's going to show up, right? Because the gloss, it'll show those imperfections in any sort of flat surface. That's the same problem you're going to find when you use any sort of glossed paint, is it's going to show up the imperfections, which again kind of goes to another aspect of this, that if I'm using a flat paint, the imperfections, that the walls don't have to be repaired perfectly. You can get away with a little bit. It doesn't have to be sanded down 12 times and remudded and coated and finish coated, and like you can generally get away with one or two at the most. With flat paint, it's not going to show the imperfections in the walls. This is especially more important if you have an older property. If you have a newer property, yeah, that's fine. But keep in mind, properties still are going to age. And as as the walls get beat up, as they, start to settle and crack, and, things need to be, skim coated again, I'm just telling you that those semi-gloss walls are going to start to show the imperfections when you paint it with a semi-gloss. That's one of the reasons why I like a flat paint. The other reason is that I can get away with touching up a wall that's been painted with a flat paint versus one that's been painted with a semi-gloss. Again, let's go back to our car example, right? It takes a very skilled hand to be able to blend in a certain repair on a corner panel, right? So if you've got a quarter panel on a car that got damaged and it's just a spot, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to feather that in, and most people do not have the skill to do that with a semi-gloss paint on a wall. I'm just saying. I can do it. It always still somehow, and I've been doing it for years, but it still somehow looks like, yeah, that area there looks like it's a different color than the rest of the wall, right? That's the problem. So with a flat paint, this is generally much less of a problem. All right. So that's why, in terms of touching up the paint rather than having to paint, and again, you don't necessarily, maybe you just have to paint a wall, where I would paint from corner to corner, ceiling to floor. That would be the only area that I would paint. So with a flat paint, you can get away with just, okay, that area was damaged, we're going to, skim coat that, plug up the holes, and then, feather it in, and it actually looks fine, as long as it's the same brand, the same quality, and the same color. You cannot mix brands, you cannot mix formulas. It's got to be the exact same. So that's what I'm talking about. So again, today we're talking about flat paint, eggshell, or semi-gloss. It's a conversation I have had many, many times. So this is one of the reasons why I like to use flat over semi-gloss or even eggshell. Eggshell still, it's kind of the halfway between flat and semi-gloss. I don't really generally use an eggshell for really anything. I pretty much, if I'm going to use a flat or a semi-gloss, I generally don't use an eggshell. Eggshell is just kind of in between. I just don't use it. Where am I going to use a semi-gloss though? The semi-gloss I will use for example, if I'm painting anything that's going to have any sort of hand traffic on it, right? So if anybody's got, any doors, any solid doors or any sort of doors that are going to need to be painted, I paint them with a semi-gloss. Any trim, I would paint with a semi-gloss. If I'm painting cabinets, painting with a semi-gloss. Anything that generally is going to need to be wiped down, where would that be? Backsplashes on a kitchen, right? So if you've got a backsplash area, I would paint that with a semi-gloss, good quality semi-gloss. Where else would you might use a semi-gloss? In a bathroom, right? So things aren't going to adhere as well, or like mold is generally it's less porous, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So those are the areas where I like to use a semi-gloss. Ceilings, honestly, you can use either. I don't really care. I mean, a lot of times if I'm going to be painting a ceiling, if I've got a bucket of primer, I would just use primer on it. But again, you can feel free to argue with me. But again, the whole point of this is that I want to do whatever is the fastest for the repair, and it's a good repair. So getting the properties turned as quickly as possible, and I'm trying to avoid to do a full paint each and every time. sometimes when you have a property that's been painted with a semi-gloss, there really is no way to get around it other than repainting the entire wall, house, whatever. So that's why when for me, this is a strategy that has worked well for over the years. And again, because I want to turn the properties as quickly as possible and go from day zero, right, on our landlord, on our vacancy checklist and the landlord cycle, I'm going to go from day zero to day one as quickly as I possibly can, right? So from day zero where I'm making $0 to day one where I'm handing someone keys and they're handing me a check. So that's the whole concept. So again, looking at it through that lens of how quickly can I get a property turned, I always opt for flat paint, more often than not on walls. And again, the only time I'm going to be using a semi-gloss is either on trim, doors, or backsplashes. So I hope you guys found that helpful. You guys were quiet today. Didn't really see any comments, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Tonight I'll be speaking on a panel at one of the local Real Estate Investors Associations, CIREA, down in Indianapolis, and it is snowing. I can't believe it. Here it is on, I don't know what someone upstairs is smoking, but it is April the 20th, and it's snowing pretty good outside. So anyway, that's all I have for today, everybody. So please be sure to place a value on your free time, because if you don't, someone else will. But most important, there is no amount of money that will make time irrelevant. Have an awesome day. I will see you guys next time.